Okay. Well, we've let everybody in, correct?
Yeah, it shouldn't, everyone should be able to pop in.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome everybody to the Hospice Lunch and Learn. Last year, I believe, or the year before, we were live, and this time we are Zooming to you still live here from various areas in Wichita Falls. Today, we are going to be talking about the language of money. So it's not all about just dollars and cents. It's about language. Speaking of language, we have our president, Michelle Cooner from Personal Money Planning. She is a CHFC, FPQP, etc. And those are just one language saying that she really, really likes all things that deal with personal finance. As for me, I'm Tina Hopla. I'm the marketing manager. I'm also a certified credit counselor. And so today we're going to be talking about the language of money. How do we learn that language, and why is it important that we learn where that language comes from? So I know that Michelle had been at a conference and heard this quote from Robert Herjavec. I believe he's on Shark Tank. Is that right?
He is, yes.
So he says, if you can't speak money, you will be broke for the rest of your life. And what did that speak to you when you heard that, Michelle?
Actually, I thought initially, I wrote it down because I thought, oh, that's kind of a neat quote. I'll probably use that somewhere because it dealt with money. But I then initially thought that's kind of snooty because I thought it was more along the terms of like options trading and derivatives and investing and things like that. But the more that I kind of dug into it, it was really about the language of money and how we view and use money to express ourselves, and how our expressions verbally and our actions can represent that as well. And so I dug into it a little bit more and found out that there's actually this whole branch that deals with language of money or speaking money. And because usually when we think about financial issues, we kind of either kind of focus on maybe cash flow management, creating a budget, creating spending plans, maybe debt management, even investment management, but we don't really get to the root of the problem. These are all different branches of money or personal finance, but where is it at the real root of it? Why? How did we learn this? How do we get these I guess these personalities or these tendencies to either spend or save or where does it all come from? And that's kind of what we're going to look at a little bit more today, is more of the behavioral finance and money personality portions of it, and not only what you feel or how you feel you're speaking, but also understanding how maybe your partner speaks, because there's going to be conflict if we're not all speaking the same language. And so money language, Tina, when I ask you, like, what does that mean to you? When I say the term or you hear the language of money, what does that mean to you? What's the first thing that pops in your mind?
Well, the first thing is, I don't want to talk about it, language of money. I think of all the scary things like you already mentioned, the derivatives and the things that, even though I've been with personal money planning for so long time, I wouldn't be able to explain to somebody.
Yeah, and it's really, just like with any language, it's just how we express ourselves. It's how we understand and how we express ourselves. And we're just throwing in the caveat of learning to do that with money. And money is often cited as one of the number one issues when it comes to couples arguing. And often that's because when it comes to financial matters, many people aren't speaking the same language. So you have two people together that may want the same goals or they want the same outcome, but they don't know how to communicate that well to each other nor through their actions. And so what we want to do is get a better understanding of not only how we're presenting ourselves, but getting maybe understand how they're presenting themselves and some of their fears and goals and underlying root causes for this, so we can have an open and honest discussion about these types of things and understand their viewpoints. Because I think we can probably all agree, and as you just mentioned, you don't really want to talk about this stuff too much. And it can be kind of treacherous for some people, especially if you have people that, two pieces of a couple that are completely speaking different languages or have different viewpoints on this. That's the last thing that you want to, come together and talk about, because odds are it's going to lead to a disagreement.
Right. I think that in order to, um, when I think of language, of course, I think of writing, because I do a lot of writing. You have to learn the language before you can write a novel in it. So if you are, working on money things with somebody who's speaking a different money language than you, and you don't know what you're speaking, it's going to be hard for you to get to any kind of goal.
And that, you bring up a really good point, because I can go shopping. I can go to the grocery store just fine. I can, order stuff online. I can do things like that, and it's not a big deal. I can get directions. But when I used to travel to Germany, my late husband was German Air Force. And when I would travel to Germany, trying to get directions, I could not figure out how to unlock the German cell phone, because you had to press certain buttons. So while I had a phone, I could not express, like, how can I call someone? How do I unlock the phone? Because everyone was speaking in German to me. And so we had that language barrier. And it wasn't the fact that I didn't know how to use a phone or that I didn't know how to walk around the block. And by the way, Strasse is not part of a specific street name. It just means street in Germany, because I was like, I've got this. I'll remember this name. No, they all say that. And so it was very difficult for me, because I didn't understand what to look for. And so that's what we're going to try to help you do today, is to really kind of get to that root problem. And because since both perspectives are really important pieces of this puzzle here, we do need, to come together and work collectively to input, ideas and goals and expectations, and work collaboratively and equally to, come up towards these outcomes. Because if one person's doing all of the dictating, how much on board am I really going to be if my opinions and my voice is not being heard? So how do you determine which money language you speak? Any ideas, Tina?
Well, I think the way that I speak is the right way, and the way everybody else speaks is the wrong way.
Do you think Gellert would say that the same?
Yes.
I think there are so many. We can pull up so many different things and pull up a search engine and find this stuff. And if you do, there are tons of quizzes out there. And whether you call it money language or money personality, there are a lot of things online you can find. Some of them are free, others charge a small fee, and some are very, very detailed. I pulled up one and it was like 12 pages, and it basically was just a lot of fluff I think they put in because you paid, a few dollars for it. And some of them offer just a quick synopsis. So we're going to really dig in to see and just make it very simple. We're going to look at 4 different languages that you may be associated or resonate a little bit closer with. Now, this all started with financial psychologist Dr. Kenneth Dole, who is actually a licensed psychologist and a retired financial planner. And so 2 really people you really don't want to have at parties, right? Both not very not very fun personalities, but he blended these 2, the financial planning and financial psychology portion of it, and determined there are 4 basic money language profiles. And each one of these have a different set of strengths and weaknesses. And so we're going to take a look at these 4 and determine which one you may, feel like you're a little bit closer to. And the reason we want to do this is the strengths are great, right? But on the weaknesses, we want to see if, we can kind of maybe mitigate some of those weaknesses. Let's see, we have a question.
That's just me. I'm just letting people know if they want to think about what their money profile is, even before we get started. And then that way they just kind of think about it maybe toward the end if they have any questions.
Yeah, take a look. We have just a quick, very little summary, like for instance, the driver, money is success. See which one, before we get started and diving into them too much, just pick one that you may think that you kind of are drawn to a little bit more. And by the way, at the end of this, we're going to definitely open up the mic so everyone can ask questions. So we're going to try to get through some of this and then really let y'all do some back and forth with us. So this first one, the driver, this is someone that equates money to success. Having money protects against fear of incompetence. And the more money that they have, the more successful that they feel and the more competent that they feel. And I think we equated this to the Tom Cruise movie. It was that Show Me the Money. Which one was that?
I just went blank.
That Tom Cruise movie. Jerry Maguire.
Jerry Maguire, yes.
Jerry Maguire. So this is definitely a Jerry Maguire type personality. Drivers communicate love by showing what money has done for them to help improve their lives and also the lives of those around them. Now, their weakness is that they can be overly dependent on money for their self-esteem. And when they lack money, their self-esteem plummets. So they need that to kind of keep it afloat. And they feel a deep sense of an inadequacy when they have a lack of money and tend to be very much more materialistic than other money profiles. And I know in some of our monthly webinars, we really discussed a behavioral finance called hedonic adaptation. And what hedonic adaptation is let's say that I have, I'm working a job, I'm paying bills, I have plenty of money, adequate money, I shouldn't say plenty, but adequate money to pay my bills and even put some back in savings if I want. Well, if I get a raise, let's say $10,000 a year, while I was completely happy making the original amount, now that I have $10,000 more per year, I can quickly adapt to that. And so by adapting to it, and I'm beginning, I reach that where I'm spending that full $10,000 a year now more, going backwards doesn't make me, where I was happy there, I'm not going to be happy anymore. And that's what we call hedonic adaptation. And that's what we often see with the drivers. They're very materialistic. So they're always wanting that next high, if you will. That next accomplishment, that next success story, and they want to be able to show for it. And the way that we show for that kind of stuff is buying stuff, buying a new car, buying a bigger house, having all of this stuff. And while stuff is fine to have, it's not so good whenever this is the particular driver for it, if you will. Now, the analytic uses money as a security blanket. It's a source of security to protect them from life's unexpected events. And they tend to be rather structured and organized when it comes to following a budget. And they have very, very little trouble establishing and maintaining a very, very detailed spending plan. To give you an idea of what I mean by this, I had someone come in for financial coaching. And one of the first things that we do is we look over their spending plan or their budget. And oftentimes, more than not, then there's not one. It's non-existent. And so one of the first things that we do is have them establish and track expenses for 30 days. And I like to always hone in on the groceries because it seems that is the highest area that gets overlooked. They'll say, I spend about $500 a month, and they come back and, between that and eating out, and it's like $800 or $900. And so that's always a shocker for them. And so I had this individual track her grocery expenses for the month. And she came back the following month with this 3-inch 3-ring binder. And she opened it up and she had detailed her grocery expenses, not only by grocery trip, but she had also segmented them out into protein, dairy. And then under dairy, there was cheese and butter and yogurt. And I was like, this is great. if you're wanting to track it to that, to that detail, to that granular level. But I really didn't care how much cheese she ate. Her doctor, on the other hand, may if she has kidney stones, but I certainly didn't mind that. I didn't need to know how much she spent on her dairy. But this is what I'm talking about when I say that a very detailed, spending plan. They can really get down to that nitty gritty and figure out where every penny's going. And because of this, the analytic communicates love by saying money, by saving money and looking out for the future well-being of their, not only them, but those that they love. And so this is how they express themselves by, I don't want to say by hoarding money, but that typically is what we often see. And since they're so good at these spending plans, they can really make some short and long-term goals. And they definitely, since they're tracking every penny, they're able to achieve that. Now, what we see with this is that because one of their weaknesses we see is that they tend to be, and the reason that it is a weakness is because with this militant or authoritative style of budgeting that they have, this leads to those around them feeling like you care more about that and saving money than about us. We wanted to go on this trip and we saved up for it and we've sacrificed all this time and we have the money, we've achieved that goal, but then they have a very hard time letting go of that money. So they often let people down in that aspect. And so instead of having that well-rounded, where you are financially sound, but they're missing that work-life balance, if you will, they're not really living as well either. And so that's the weakness that we often see with the analytic. They spend so much time, and I don't like to use the word hoarding, but they do tend to, hoard a little bit on that side of things. They unintentionally come across as one that disregards the feelings of others. And due to that, they often have marital discord as well. Even though, you have someone that's just like the driver that's going out and just spending like it's burning a hole in their pocket. It can't, it can't fly. The dollars can't fly out of their wallet fast enough. With the analytic, their tight grip, it's like a white knuckle grip on the money, tends to do the same thing. So either side, if you're looking at polar opposites, you just have to get that really good balance in the middle there.
And understanding where they're coming from too, because you mentioned the word hoarding. If you've ever watched an episode of Hoarders, there's always something else below it. And so for the analytic, if as a security blanket, they're holding on to something. It might might bring up a different conversation in the relationship, but at least if you understand where that's coming from, and maybe you could focus on that worry when you're saying, okay, I'm feeling let down, but I know you may be doing this because you really are wanting the best for us, even though it doesn't seem that way.
Yeah, and I think we often hear something like, I'm doing it for your own good type thing. And we don't want to hear that. That's not any fun. That doesn't get you to lay on a beach in Florida. So we certainly don't want to hear that. And it may be for the good of the family or of the unit, but there has to be that balance there as well. Now, with the amiable, the focus of someone that identifies with this particular personality is one that's towards relationship and people. And they tend to communicate love through sharing what they have with their friends and family. And since money means love and affection to this group, they really lack, it translates to the inability to show love, if you will, or to communicate love if they don't have that money. Does that make sense?
Right.
So if they don't have it, they don't feel like they're showing love to those people. And if they don't show love to those people, then maybe they're not going to receive love back. So it works both ways, the giving and receiving of love, because a lot of people, and it could be that you may have someone that just has such, maybe low self-esteem or some insecurities that it's almost like they're trying to buy that love. from the individuals, and that's the weakness. And that may not be the root cause of it, but that may be how they feel it is.
Right. And I think another one of their weaknesses is they may spend money they don't have because, or that isn't within their budget because they're trying to gain.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And because of this, because of the very generous and good-hearted nature that they have, they are often very, very poor money managers, and they often lack, even for certain long-term planning skills. There's just nothing there because they can't think that far ahead. They're kind of living in the now. But even with some short-term planning skills, they tend to have trouble with that because it's all right now. What can I do to get this right now? And so we always say, while sharing is caring, sharing too much may leave the partner feeling that their financial security is irrelevant. And so even though they're sharing this love, they're not really showing it to that one person. They really need to, in the way that that person, not how you feel it is, but how that person perceives it. And that's really what, it's not how you're speaking, but it's how they're hearing it. And so that's one of the things that is hard sometimes for us to relate to, is that we're saying, well, we're doing this because we love you. And they're like, no, if you love me, you would be doing this. And so that's where we kind of have that this kind of
disconnect.
Yeah, the disconnect on it. And then we have the expressive, where money is definitely acceptance. It offers the respect and admiration of others. And it also allows for building relationships with equally desirable people. And this is like spot on, check mark the box, keeping up with the Joneses type of personality. That's what they're, and we often see this, like they want to own certain things, to be in certain clubs, to run with the certain people, whether it's like the country club and going golfing, or like being in, we're like a car club. Like I own a Tesla, so us Tesla people over here understand this lingo and you others don't understand it. And this is why I'm spent way too much money on a car. But it's one of those things that, you want to be in this specific group. And so to get into that group, then you will spend money. The spending of money often, and you mentioned this in the amiable category as well, it's often masking a much deeper issue, like hiding feelings of pain, insecurity, and incompetence. And their weakness in this particular area is being overly dependent on money. And this is usually, they feel it's to solve problems and calm fears, and they are unsuccessful in doing so, because we're just like digging a hole by buying the stuff, and we're digging a hole deeper and deeper. And we kind of go back to that hedonic adaptation part too, where we're buying something to give us this joy, but then that joy is short-lived. So we have to find something else to boost that again.
Right. And I think, since it's acceptance into a group, if you're feeling like you're not part of the group and that this will create it, then, buying it will create, be part of the in crowd, then yeah, you're going to run in circles because, you're fine just as you are. No matter
You can kind of see this, and I don't know if I mentioned this already, but you can be bilingual. You can have these types of things. So you may be an amiable and an expressive, where you're saying that I like to spend money on these things, and I'm showing money in this way, but I also like to spend money in this particular area, so I can feel that camaraderie with other like-minded people that have the same things that I do. So as with any language, speaking money is an acquired skill, and it's often learned through one's upbringing. And the language, whether informal or formal, is usually formed in our childhood. And I think you touched on this earlier, Tina, where we witnessed, maybe how we witnessed our parents doing something, or how they dealt with finances. We either want to mimic it, or we want to go the complete opposite way. You usually don't have something like right balanced in the middle. It's usually, one end of the polar scale or the other. So understanding the root of the good, the bad, and the ugly of the money habits that we've learned growing up helps us understand the language that we speak today. So where we've concentrated on the language we've spoke or that we tend to speak now we're going to dig even a little bit deeper and see why we speak that language. And typically what we see is there's 5 different basic, what we can call parenting skill or parenting types, if you will. And for instance, with the, let me move this little toolbar down. With the frugal parents, if one's parents were like really frugal throughout their childhood, they may overspend now to compensate for feelings of being deprived, certain advantages as a child, and then this overspending tends to lead to financial insecurity, a lack of adequate retirement or emergency savings, and guess what? Eventually marital discord. And that's why we see this. I mean, with money, that is one of the top reasons that people argue in a relationship, is because anything that we do to one extreme or the other is going to cause these types of hiccups and these types of headaches for us. Now, on the other hand, if your parents were really, really frugal, and if that frugality was rooted deep enough as a fear and not just like, this is why we did this, but if it's rooted as a fear, and we often see this with like the baby boomer generation where their parents may have gone through, say, the Great Depression, and they're like, they were terrified now that they are, maybe this analytic type of language that they speak because they had to, they didn't have food. It wasn't that they couldn't go, buy a new pair of designer jeans. It was like, we're not going to be able to eat. And so we typically see either with frugal parents, we go one opposite way. Either we just, burn a hole with money in our pocket, or we typically have that same saving and frugality mindset that they did. And as we saw with the analytic perspective, those close to someone with these very cautious spending habits may feel neglected or a disregard for their feelings, which ends up in the same ultimate area of marital discord. Now, what do you think happens if we have parents that spoil their kids?
Well, I think that as adults, you may just not understand that you have to really work for that. If you've always been given everything that you want, then when you get older and things don't just magically appear, that might be frustrating. Or if you get in a relationship where you have expectations of always dining out at the finest restaurants because you always did as you were growing up, and the person that you are sharing your life with is like, well, we can't be doing that all the time, then you may respond negatively to that.
So special occasions aren't like a daily event or occurrence.
Right.
Now, wanting to provide more and better for your kids is absolutely fine. But where we see that, like you said, kind of going overboard a bit is if you're spoiling the child and then setting them up for financial insecurity through their adulthood, because by providing these, this luxurious lifestyle and, the best of the best, and, you never have the new car smell wear out. What we end up doing is we create that sense of entitlement. Like, this is normal. Why can't I do this? I did this like all growing up. And why are you telling me that I don't deserve it? And that's where we see this type of thing again. And so what we end up having is, young adults moving out of mom and dad's home and starting to build their own home. And they may not be able to have, the 6,000 count, thread count sheets initially. They may have to settle. We may not get the best of the best. And so understanding that and setting them up by going overboard and spoiling them, we're actually having an opposite effect in their adulthood, because we are setting them up for financial insecurity by expecting that. And it's not bad to have stuff. Having stuff's not a bad thing. Having nice stuff's not a bad thing. Having expensive stuff is not a bad thing. It's just you need to find that balance between happy and financially sound. And we see, I think Brittany, one of our coworkers, she talks about with her kids. She's like, I will buy very good quality clothing, but she doesn't buy a lot of it. And then it's handed down. And she's like, so I will spend more on clothing because we don't have a lot. We don't want quantity. We're really focused on the quality of it. And that's where I think if we kind of put our mindset in that, because I mean, let's face it, if we go through, I'm guilty too. I mean, I am first in line on the clothing guilt trip here. I am going through my closet now, and I probably got rid of a full trash bag on one side of my closet already of stuff I have not worn, and I have no intention of wearing, that will be heading to probably the Goodwill this week. But with that, we're all in this together, and having stuff is not a bad thing. It's just having too much stuff. Sometimes we need to really prioritize and find what we find value in and what makes us happy. Now with the charitable parents, how do you think that has an impact on us, Tina?
Well, I think there's the possibility as a child, if you see that your parents are always giving additional money to the charities that they support, there's a couple different ways that could go. I guess you as a young child, if you want something and you're like, well, the money is going there, why can't it go toward me? There might be some negative aspects of that. So as you grow older, you may go, like you said, it could be one way or the other. You could either be somebody who was like, okay, this is what my parents did, so I guess this is what I'm supposed to do, or you won't be charitable at all because you feel like it's depriving you of what you would want.
Yeah, and really it's with, and you touched on that both ways too. The individual may feel a sense of obligation or guilt to continue the charitable keeping up with the Joneses, if you will. They have to keep up with that same level. And it's important to kind of take a step back and realize that one's preference of philanthropic giving is an individual thing. And that just because someone else did it doesn't mean you have to do it. So I'm going to totally twist that back around, because usually it's the parent saying, well, just because Johnny did it, do you have to do it? And now we're saying, just because your parents did it, does that mean you have to do it? And no, it absolutely does not. Spending more than one can afford, regardless if it's on a charity or a new really cool pair of wedge sandals that I have bypassed twice now, it's just as bad, or a kitchen gadget, or a vacation, or a new tool. It's just as irresponsible. It's spending money that you don't have. So prioritizing the charities that are important to you and focusing on just those will lead to, and the ones that are important to you, that you value and that you find are, kind of hit home to you, will really lead to financial stability. And this behavior is really prevalent in the amiable language group. And often these individuals will end up giving till it hurts because they're wanting to spread that love, right? And so they will give till it hurts. And this generosity, while it's definitely appreciated by many charities, is detrimental to their financial outlook and often causes problems in the marriage. And which is kind of a weird thing, because you're like, well, I'm giving to this charity, I'm being helpful, and they're like, yeah, but what about us? We are going to be without electricity this month. Is that what you want to do? And so, giving till it hurts, give what you feel comfortable with, but definitely not till it hurts. No one wants to see, and no one finds joy in whatever gift you're giving if it's actually hurting you. We often have those that lack of financial literacy. Parents just did not discuss money with their kids at all. And we see this, it's very, very common with baby boomers out there. Money has a very notorious reputation for being like dirty or taboo to talk about. It was rude to talk about money, or how much money or how little money you had. And women have a long history of being kept in the dark about financial issues and household finances. And I can tell you, when we see some older widows that come to us to have us review some of their stuff, many of them can't even apply for a credit card because they don't have credit history. They may have had, they pay with cash, they'll have a debit card, but they've never had a loan in their name. And so it wasn't discussed with them. Or they'll say, I don't know where all of this is. John took care of all of this stuff for us. I don't know where the money is or what we have. And so here are all the papers that come in the mail. And so this tends to lead to the feeling of foolishness about financial topics and products. I mean, Tina, we work in the business. And if I came to you and said, hey, there's this really great investment. It's this deferred fixed annuity joint life with 20-year period certain payout. You should really get it. And, and if you don't, you're a big dodo. What are you going to do? You either are going to take me up on the offer and that may not be right for you, or you're going to be like, I have no idea what language you were speaking just now. And I would rather rake leaves with a fork than to study any of that type of stuff and even do any research on it. Probably the latter, right? Yeah. And that's not uncommon. People would rather get poked in the eye with a sharp stick than to read anything about annuities or investments or financial issues. And so what we see with that is that we either go one of two ways with that. We either study it or we just, bury money in a coffee can in the backyard or under the mattress, because if we don't know what to do, if we don't know what investments we should do, then let's just not do anything, right? Safest thing is do nothing. And that's where we often see that they have, people that fall into this category have, lacking long range goals, lacking any type of advanced money skills. I mean, they may be able to, balance a checkbook and do those types of things, but they're not going to invest in any types of equities or, mutual funds or individual stocks or bonds that they could and really kind of possibly need in their portfolio to keep up with inflation because, well, they don't know what they are. And this is very, very common. We see that this is a very common theme. And our last one are divorced parents. And this can lead to so many different things. We did an entire webinar over blended families. And 2 separate Christmas celebrations are a real thing. Competing gift giving is as well. And according to the National Center for Family and Marriage Research, 41% of first marriages go down the drain. 60% of the second and 73% of third marriages all fail. That is shocking numbers. And it has become extremely common to have 2 separate fully blended families and fully blended family get-togethers during the holidays. And oftentimes this overspending to, create this new happily ever after for the kids, all the kids, both sides of the kids' families, often causes financial discord. And we're trying to do that. We have these blended families and we are trying to make it easier for them during these special events by buying more stuff and keeping up with more stuff. And I think you had a really great story that you shared in when we discussed this before. You want to share that again?
Sure. My parents were divorced from the time I was very young, and this kind of goes along with the spoiled child as well. My mom had been dating a guy and was engaged to a guy who had 2 children. My mom was a single parent with 5 children. And so in trying to kind of create this family, they were negotiating how they were going to be gift giving during the holiday season. Now, the 2 children of the soon-to-be husband wanted to give his kids skis and a ski trip and ski jackets, and that was very, very expensive. Where there were 5 of us, and we were happy with getting like just a few of our gifts, and we would get gifts from our dad and our mom, but still it wasn't like ski trips. It wasn't anything like that. And but my mom had a feeling like if she didn't match what the the our future stepbrothers and sisters were getting, that we may feel bad. So that year they went into debt, and my mom went into debt to give us kind of extraordinary gifts at the time. I mean, this is going to age me a little bit, but my mom bought me a typewriter, an electric typewriter with a little screen on it. I kept it for like 20 years. And it was awesome, but I felt almost guilty about it because I knew that it wasn't something that we could afford. And they eventually did break up. That didn't end up being my stepdad. And I think that was probably one of the big reasons. But yeah, it definitely showed how there was different realities, but also different languages attached to those realities.
And you bring up I don't know if we mentioned this exact word yet, but when we talk about different languages, there could be different dialects within that. And the different dialects could be that you may have two people that are, amiable, but the dialect could be to what extreme. And so that's where we kind of see the gamut of what all can be cause our spending and our expressions and all of that. So what we really typically see is that all of these types of things that our family or our upbringing has taught us is how we speak now. And so these are kind of those underlying fears and concerns. And so if you have someone or have a couple that's together that speak two different languages, or even if they speak the same language, understanding the reasons behind it and maybe working on those weaknesses and understanding those weaknesses is definitely a big thing to do. I mean, it can really help a relationship because, I mean, if you have two people that have the same language, so that we're at least making it easier. They speak the same language, but they have different underlying reasons for that. Then you can still have the same problems as if they didn't speak the same language at all, because it's not, they're different fears, they're different goals, they're different mindsets on it. And that may not change. I mean, you can't change what's engraved into someone's being, but what we can do is learn to understand why they're doing that and then work with those fears and with those concerns to make sure that those are met. And then they can also learn to understand that maybe I'm going a little bit overboard on this particular thing. As long as we have this and set whatever this is, this whatever dollar amount in, and this is particularly good for the analytic, as long as we have this dollar amount set in the bank, I'm okay. But do we really want to spend that much on a family vacation? Maybe not, but maybe we still go on a family vacation and spend a little bit less. Pack a lunch instead of eating a burger at the food court or something. I don't know. So you can make compromises in that and gain a better understanding of the ingrained underlying habits of our financial issues. It's going to allow us a better understanding of the money language we speak. And it also helps us translating our partner's language as well. And only when you're both understanding the same language that's being spoken can you really communicate clearly and understand each other. So I know we've left a bit of time for some questions, and I'm going to go ahead and just unmute the mics on everyone. And so if you have any, I think I'm unmuting all of these.
I think it sends a message that you're asking them to unmute if they want to.
Yeah. Ask to unmute. So I think I've hit everyone to ask to unmute. If you have any questions, feel free to just blurt them out.
You can blurt them out, or you can put them in the Q&A, and we'll be the ones who see them. We can respond on the call. um, just as we're people are typing away or getting up courage to speak. Carrie, did you have a question? No, she does not have. All right. I was just going to mention that next week we are going to be doing a webinar, um, and eventually it will be on our YouTube channel as well, and that is going to be over. And I just went blank. Our panic cushion. It's a fun way of saying your emergency fund, but you know. You can find out about those. And then also, if you have some teens and young adults, Michelle is doing this Friday. She is doing a webinar for like homeschool kids and young adults that may be helpful. And I'll put this in the chat. And you can always find this on personalmoneyplanning.com and go to our events section.
And what we will end up doing, we've recorded this, so we're definitely going to put a link to it so y'all can throw in the hub. And we do have one question that came in, and in that link, when I send the email, I'm going to also put our link into not only our webinar series, but if you want to hit our YouTube channel, we record all of those as well, so you can really you can never get too much of Tina and Michelle. See, are there certain techniques to learn in order to strengthen your weaknesses in language or to change them? And for instance, let's look at the analytic. That's kind of a good personality one that we can look at. If you are an analytic, we know that the weaknesses are you are so militant in your techniques for budgeting. It's like, okay, we spent $4.23 on cheese. It doesn't need to be that extreme. And on your strengths, really, I wouldn't say that working on your strengths to back off of them is too important, but it's more increasing or working on the weaknesses and playing off of, if you're in a partnership, playing off of their strengths. Because Tina's great with writing. I can throw something together and just say, I want to talk about blah, 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 and give her an idea. And the next thing next thing I know, she can send something to me that's fantastic. So that's her strength. But if she wants an extensive spreadsheet, she may come to me. And so, especially if we're doing like triple if then formulas, so we can play on each other's strengths. And so I think that's something important to do when you're looking at the relationship, is figure out what strengths that you have, what strengths that your partner has, and then discuss those weaknesses. And some of your weaknesses may be their strengths, and they can pull up in that area. But to understand what your weaknesses are and to kind of not be so forceful with them. If you are an overspender, maybe set those budgets. If you don't want to spend it all, agree to spend a certain amount. Set a goal and stick with it. And I think that just goes to, it's something that may be really important to the other person in your relationship, like going on a vacation or having. I know a lot of our clients now would prefer what they call kind of events or experiences than they do stuff for their kids. And so that's a really big thing that they want. And they're willing to give up other things to make that happen. And so if that's something that you and your partner can discuss and say, I have a really hard time spending this amount of money on a trip, maybe skip a trip one year and do the expensive trip the following year. So you're saving up for, or, kind of rounding. It's mainly just to focus in on what your weaknesses are and try to ease off of those.
So one way we've been, this year, our webinar series is called Mindful Money. And some of you may know me. I'm also working on my yoga teaching certification. So mindfulness is really on my mind. Haha. And so when you are planning a purchase or you're thinking about a purchase, it's kind of like the old Weight Watchers diet thing, when you're thinking about what you're doing, and you're putting the fork down between each bite, because you are really focusing on what that is. So when you're spending, or you're deciding not to spend, if you just take a moment in that time to understand, to think about, why am I doing this? And if it are you doing it just because you always do it? Do you always stop at Starbucks on the way to work? Then and is it becoming a problem? Or is it an enjoyment of your life that you just don't want to get rid of? As long as you understand kind of what is going on underneath the surface, like Michelle was saying, at the root, that may help you define your weaknesses a little bit better, so you know how to move forward.
And even when on that same kind of, I'm going to piggyback on that, even with that, if you write down those values, make sure that each of you, if you're, if you're single, write them down, because then that piece of paper is going to be your accountability coach. But if you are a partnership, then share those values with each other. And if one of the values is, I want to give to charity this amount, how can we make that happen? Then you come up with a plan. And that's what I was mentioning, that if you jointly come up with a plan, then both parties feel like they have participated and they're on board with that. And when you're both on board with it, then you're going to have more success than, having to kind of drag this person along and it's like, put a smile on and let's go. You can't necessarily do that. And so you want them to be on board with what you're working on as a joint collaborative effort. And I think that's what makes it the biggest thing that makes it successful.